guys, we're going to start with the chassis work now. You can see here that the coolant pipes have already been installed, and we're proceeding with step number 6 of this build. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to have to do is attach the cross member. And when you look at the cross member itself, you're going to see that it's got 2 pins or pegs here, one on each side. Now they're going to slot into the chassis in the 2 slots here, one here and one here, one on each side of the frame rail. Now, what you want to look out for is that you're going to have these coolant pipes are going to be just slightly in your way. So when you push down on the cross member, you're going to have to make sure that it's seated fully, as the coolant pipes tend to want to push up on the cross member, and that may add to the height of the car, which is something you definitely don't want. So you're going to have to make sure that the cross member is fully seated against the frame rails on each side to have it fully settled into the cross member. So we're going to put a little glue on there and get this all done up. It's a very simple procedure. The entire front suspension, it only consists of 2 parts, which is the cross member and the control arm steering gear assembly, which that again is going to be another interesting bit to put together. So there we go, one bit of super glue there, a little bit there, let's give it a little more. Right, now we're going to install our cross member, and as I said, we're going to make sure that it's fully seated against the chassis. Because the last thing we want is this thing moving out of position. Now, there's no front and back on this cross member. It doesn't matter which side you face it, either this, if you flip it this way or that way, it doesn't matter. It's the same on both sides, which I'm sure they did that for ease of assembly. So we're here, the pipes are not pushing against it. So we are in good shape here. Now we're going to have to make sure that it's fully cured in there. For that, we're going to cheat a little bit and use a little accelerator. Now, for the next step, which is step 4 and the final step of step 6, is installing the rack and pinion sway bar control arm assembly, which they have cast all into one part. Now this one has been slightly deformed, as one of the things you discover when you build all of these kits one after the other is that they're not all exactly the same. There are some slight deformations in the kit in certain areas. Now, when you're installing the steering gear and control arm assembly into the kit, there are 2, let's just pull this out of here. There are 2 pegs under the sway bar mounting brackets. Now those pegs have to peg into the hole that's furthest back from the front of the car. And then the lower part of the control arms, the lower control arms here and here, you guys can see this on the side of those control arms, are going to slot into the subframe here and here, or the cross member on these two slots here. So you're going to have 2 glue points here and 2 glue points here to hold the assembly in place. Now, one thing you're going to want to do, which is something I've noticed on more than one of these kits, is that when you glue this in, this control arm should be in direct contact with the spindle here. You have your upper control arm, your spindle, and your lower control arm. Now, when you attach this, you're going to notice that it's not going to sit flush. So you're going to have to put a bit of glue there and make sure that this stays flush with the spindle, so that everything's making contact. So that instead of just 4 glue points, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3 on each side. Now, the instructions don't make note of this because the only 2 glue points that they're showing you are the 2 on the sway bar. There's no indicator for the other contact points. So you're going to have to be aware that there's going to be 2 more contact points on the control arm itself. All right, so let's lay a little glue down here and get this going. But one thing I did notice is that the holes are just a little small. So, or it could just be that space is taken up by the paint. So we're going to just ream those out a little bit. Just to see if it makes it a little easier to peg those in there. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting, because you're going to have to, I would recommend you put the super glue on the 4 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to take care of those first, and then we will deal with what's going on with the control arms. Now, you're going to have to tuck in the rear of the control arms under your coolant pipes, or you're going to end up knocking them out of position. Then you're going to have to work the pegs for the sway bars into their position. Don't be afraid to give it a little persuasion. Okay, now this is where you're going to have to hold this together a bit, because you want to make sure that everything glues into its proper position. Now with the sway bar, it's got a bit of a friction fit, so you're not going to have to worry too much about that. But the control arms are going to want to pop out on you. Because they're not going to want to stay in the proper position. So now what I want to do is take a little super glue, a little CA glue, and I'm going to just put a dab of it there. And then we're going to need our trusty Husky clamps, which have come in very useful on this build. And we're going to use the clamps to hold the control arm in position until the glue settles and dries. Because you see what I'm saying here, how the spindle and lower control arm will separate. That's not what you want. You want everything to be together. And the only way you're going to get that is putting a healthy little amount of super glue in there and then clamping it together. And gotta try and keep the clamp on it so that it will hold. And there we go. That's going to hold together. Now, they make no mention of this in the instructions at all, so it's something that you have to look out for when you build one of these. So there's going to be resistance, so the parts are going to be fighting you a little bit. So this is the kind of thing where patience is a virtue, as Mrs. Onyx Fiero likes to say to me many times over and over again. There we go. A little accelerator to help the curing process. And now we just let it sit for a while everything cures and it locks into position just like that. Now while that's going, we still have to glue in our coolant pipes because they are not going to be part of what our issue is with the suspension. And they have to be put in first anyway. Now the coolant pipes are very easy to put in. It's just putting a couple of drops of glue on the underside for the two pegs that hold them in. So we're going to take care of that and we'll be back with the Fiero Gray chassis when everything's dry. Okay guys, we were installing the coolant pipes on Fiero Blue, and as you can see, I had to get a little help from my other helping hands here, because this pipe on this side seems to be a little twisted and it's not going exactly where I want it to, so I have to use a clamp. I'm just going to need this to hold everything steady for a bit to make sure it all cures in the right place. Or we'll run into trouble with our subframe. And I think we're going to be okay there. So remember, get yourself a nice set of clamps because they'll make your lives a lot easier. Okay guys, now we are up to step 7 on this build, which is installing the exhaust. And that's going to lead us up to the next step, which will be the rear suspension. And that's where we want to get, because that is where we're going to be able to mount the tires and then do a mock-up of the body and see exactly where our suspension is going to land. And from there, we'll be able to see what changes we have to make in order to get the stance on the other cars to be where we want them to be. So the first thing we're going to do is, as you see here on step 7, is we're going to attach the subframe to the chassis. Now that's very simple. It's just 4 spots to glue it down. So we're going to do that. get it in there so that we can see where we have to go from there. Now that we've got that in there, the next step is to install the exhaust system here. And there's our catalytic converter and muffler installed in the chassis. Now comes the fun part, is installing the exhaust tips. Now this, it's got a small notch in the muffler. It's not gonna go that way. No, it's gonna go this way. And there we go. Right there is where we want to be with the exhaust. Which of course, you know, is not gonna go right once we actually try and glue it in. Because we've got to wind our way through the opening for the muffler. And then the exhaust is going to sit right there on each side of the trunk lid. And you're just going to hope and pray that it's even. As you can see, there's the area where the subframe curves, and that's where your exhaust is going to sit. And it looks more or less even there. You're going to have to make some tiny adjustments. So the exhaust is going to be a little bit tricky to get where you want it to sit. And then we knock everything loose. Now, what it would have benefited from would have been probably a pin to lock it into the subframe here. But since it doesn't have that, what I'm going to do is put a small drop of super glue under the exhaust there. And we're going to use our trusty okay, we're going to go there, and we're just going to put a little drop of super glue there. Once we move that up, and then we're going to glue that down right there. And this should hold it right where we need it. And put a little accelerator there so we don't have to sit here for an hour holding it. And that's got us right where we need to be. Now, the interesting part of this is going to be, again, putting the exhaust tips in. Let me just make sure I've got the right sides. Again, this is not the most precise fit. And it almost might be better to wait until you have the body going on, which may be the way I play it with the other cars, before putting the exhaust on. But for now, we're in, we're good, we're done. So now we're up to step 9, which involves installing the struts and the axles and the engine. which is right where we need to be in order to figure out what we're going to do about our wheel placement. Okay guys, we have the engine and transmission installed onto the subframe. Fortunately, I wasn't filming when I did all of this, so I couldn't show you all of it going in. So I'm just going to tell you pretty much how that went. The engine has a small tab. Let's see if I can give you a good look at it. Right there, that you have to make sure the tab on the engine goes into the little slot on the subframe, as that's going to be your locating point. I'll show you on this subframe here. Now, this is one mounting point for the engine. This one is your second mounting point for the engine. You're going to make sure that the tab on the engine slots right into this mounting point here on the subframe. And then the pin on the other side of the engine is going to sit into this spot here on the subframe. Now it's going to be a very tight fit, as the engine is right up against the bulkhead on both sides. So it's really tricky to get it in there. And the airbox for the engine sits right on this ledge on the subframe. So you got to bring the engine in from up top and made it, from up top, and bring it down into the subframe, and then glue it on both mounting points. See, we can't really see it here because one is under the exhaust there. You can see right there in the center of your screen, that's where the pin goes in, and the other one is right there. Now, after installing that, you're going to install your struts, axle, and disc brake assembly. Now, I found the best way to do that was to attach the strut right to the disc brake assembly, and then install it as one unit into the model, running the axle pin right into the transmission, and then gluing your let's see if we can show you that there, gluing your tie rod to the subframe there. Now I left these in the chrome that the kit came in. As I said, this is being done as a test shot model, and so the chrome parts stay chrome, everything else is primer. The only place I made a mistake was that the valve covers were chrome, and I forgot about that and de-chromed them and primed everything on the engine. Kind of wish I hadn't done that, but hey, first time doing something like this. Also, the alternator was also chrome, so I kind of screwed up there too. So we're gonna have little bits and pieces of chrome scattered throughout the kit, and we have both axles installed. Here you can see the entire exhaust installed. Really is a nicely detailed piece. There's a lot to look at under here, and if it's painted up really nice, this could make a really nice display piece. Just the engine in the subframe with the exhaust and everything installed, just it actually looks pretty cool, especially in all gray like this. I kind of like it. So that's gonna be it for this video. I'm gonna try and remember to record this whole procedure on the other builds, on this three-way build, so I can show you guys exactly what I went through to put it all together. But for now, that's going to end this episode. Give you another look at that. And the chassis for Fiero Gray is completely done. Yeah, you can take a good look at it. It really is nicely detailed. Monogram. The more I'm getting into this kit, the more I'm feeling they did a really nice job with this. It may not be very accurate, but it does look good when it goes together. So that's it, guys. I'm going to leave it here. And because this video's gone on long enough. And we're going to keep going with this three-way build. The next couple episodes are going to focus primarily on Fiero Gray, because this is where I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do about the stance of the vehicle. As this one is going to be built just as the kit was designed. But from what I do here, I'm going to figure out what I have to re-engineer to make the other ones have a stance that is more appropriate than what the kit has. So remember, like, subscribe, hit that thumbs up button if you like what I'm doing. If you're interested in how, I know I get a little overly technical with this stuff, but I like it. And I'm hoping you guys do too. So hit the thumbs up button. It really helps with the channel and spread the word of the channel. And if you haven't subscribed when you're watching this, I know a lot of you guys that are watching are not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. You guys should join in on the fun. You'll get notified as soon as I post a new video, as if you hit that bell icon. And you can keep following these builds. All right, guys. I'll see you on the next one.